गुड मॉर्निंग मेरे प्यारे बच्चों। आज हम डील करेंगे द जीनस पेनिसिलियम का लास्ट टॉपिक, जो कि है इसके लाइफ साइकिल के ऊपर। ठीक है मेरे बच्चों, तो जो क्वेश्चन आएगा एग्जाम में वो या तो ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन के रूप में आ सकता है बच्चों, ठीक है, जिसमें आप लोगों को इवेंट्स और स्ट्रक्चर्स लिखने हैं, ठीक है, इन अ गिवन फैशन, इन अ पर्टिकुलर फैशन एंड with the help of arrows, ठीक है, and you need not to draw any diagram nor you need to write any text, ठीक है। और या तो आ सकता है आपका क्वेश्चन आ सकता है डायग्रामेटिक रिप्रेजेंटेशन या पिक्टोरियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन के रूप में भी, है ना। इसको ज्यादा हम लंबा नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि कई बार हम लोग डिस्कस कर चुके हैं इस चीज को, ठीक है। या कई बार आ जाता है लंबा प्रश्न आएगा, काफी लेंथी फुल क्वेश्चन आ सकता है, डिस्क्राइब लाइफ साइकिल ऑफ पेनिसिलियम इन डिटेल। उसमें आप लोगों को पिक्टोरियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन देना है, साथ में टेक्स्ट भी लिखना है ऑफ ईच इवेंट, text of each event and text of each structure formed during the lifespan of that organism. And the organism here is a fungal member which belongs to subdivision Ascomycotina and class Plectomycetes, is proposed by Ainsworth and Sussman in the year 1973, 72, 73. And we all know that, bachcho, the life cycle is completed in two different ways. One is in a sexual way and second one is in an asexual way, ठीक है। तो सबसे पहले हम लोग ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन को डिस्कस करेंगे, ठीक है मेरे प्यारे बच्चों। इसमें दोनों फेजेस मैंने एक ही डायग्राम में शो कर दिया है। दिस इज एसेक्सुअल फेज और एसेक्सुअल लाइफ साइकिल, वेयर एज दिस इज द सेक्सुअल लाइफ साइकिल ऑफ पेनिसिलियम, ठीक है। पहले हम एसेक्सुअल पोर्शन लेते हैं, ठीक है। We will start our journey from a vegetative thallus, which is a mycelium, a haploid vegetative mycelium. It produces conidiophores of different types depending upon species, which can either be monoverticillate type, biverticillate type, and or terverticillate type, depending upon the number of clusters or the whorls or the verticills. Why I am focusing on this word, you all are well aware of. On the basis of number of verticills, which is decided by the number of rami, not by the number of metulae. Remember, my dear students, ठीक है, different types of conidiophores are produced, and at the tip of the conidiophores, metulae are formed, which give rise to variable number of bottle shaped or flask shaped structures called phyalides or sterigmata, and a chain of conidia or conidiospores, haploid conidia or conidiospores, are formed by the upper tubular tip of the sterigma or the phyalide in a basipetal fashion, and we all know that the conidia are formed endogenously, ठीक है मेरे प्यारे बच्चों। and after liberation, these conidia germinate and produce new vegetative thallus of next generation. Thus, by passing through an asexual phase, the fungus called Penicillium, it propagates its genetic line or propagates in the form of its progenies, ठीक है। Second, we will deal with the sexual life cycle, which again starts from a haploid vegetative thallus, and we all know that the penicillium is homothelic, which is equivalent to monoecious condition in other group of organisms. That means it is a bigender structure enclosing both the genders in same thallus or same mycelium. It produces gametangia. Male gametangia are called antheridia and female gametangia are called escogonia. And the cytoplasm of antheridia or the male gametangium is called, or it becomes a male gamete, whereas the cytoplasm of escogonium or the female gametangium, it becomes female gamete. And then fertilization occurs, and the mode of a gametic fusion is oogamous type, whereas mode of sexual reproduction is gametangial contact type, in which the reproductive structures do not lose their original identity. ठीक है. And the fertilization is of some peculiar nature. How बच्चों? Because just before fertilization the male nucleus diminishes, and during fertilization, after formation of a passage in the region where the wall of escogonium and antheridium are in contact with each other, the male cytoplasm is transferred to escogonium, and that male cytoplasm induces or triggers pairing of nuclei, because we know that when the female reproductive structure called escogonium matures, it becomes an elongated structure with a curved tip or a crozier structure enclosing large number of nuclei, which are 32 to 64 in number according to our literature, and we will go with this fact. ठीक है. तो पेयरिंग ऑफ न्यूक्लियाई इन एस्कोगोनियम हो जाता है. कौन इंड्यूस करता है बच्चों? मेल साइटोप्लाज्म इंड्यूसेस दिस प्रोसेस. ठीक है. तो इसके साथ हमारा फर्टिलाइजेशन खत्म हो गया. इसके बाद का जो इवेंट आएगा पोस्ट फर्टिलाइजेशन इवेंट आएगा, जिसमें क्या होता है, जो एस्कोगोनियम जो कि अब मल्टी सेगमेंटेड स्ट्रक्चर बन गया है, ईच सेगमेंट एनक्लोजिंग अ पेयर ऑफ न्यूक्लियाई. ठीक है. Some of the segments in the middle region, they give lateral cell called escogenous initial, which results by conjugate mitotic division in that segment of escogonium enclosing two nuclei. Now this escogenous initial divides and it becomes a few-celled branched or unbranched escogenous hypha, where we can see a dikaryotic condition in each cell, again resulted by conjugate mitotic division. Now further development depends upon the cell which is selected for formation of an ascus. So there are two types of developments. One is direct development, where the terminal cell of escogenous hypha is selected, whereas in indirect method, a terminal cell of escogenous hypha, it becomes three-celled or three-segmented, and it becomes a crozier structure. It becomes a crozier or a hooked or curved structure, and the ascus is formed by its subterminal cell or penultimate cell. ठीक है मेरे प्यारे बच्चों. तो नेक्स्ट व्हाट हैपेंस, the terminal cell in case of direct development or the subterminal cell in case of indirect development, it becomes ascus mother cell, which is again dikaryotic structure. Now in this ascus mother cell, karyogamy occurs, means nuclei fuse, and resultant structure becomes an ascus, young ascus with diploid nature. Then meiosis occurs once and we get 4 haploid nuclei. Then mitosis occurs once and we get 8 haploid nuclei. In the meantime, the sac-like structure of this young ascus grows in size and it becomes our mature ascus enclosing 8 haploid nuclei. Finally, each of the 8 haploid nuclei take a part of its cytoplasm, synthesizes its own plasma membrane and a two-layered cell wall and becomes an ascospore. Thus, per ascus, we get 8 ascospores. ठीक है बच्चों. अब एक और इवेंट था जो सोमेटिक हाइफे है जिन्होंने पेरिडियम बनाना है बच्चों, वो यहां पर मैंने इंक्लूड नहीं किया है, वो आप लोग लिख सकते हो. ठीक है. अब आप लोग बोलोगे गुरुजी आपने कहा था कि ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन में लिखना कुछ नहीं है. ठीक है, हाँ लिखना नहीं है, लेकिन अगर कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट आप लोग लिख लेते हो बच्चों तो वो सोने पे सुहागा होगा. वो आपके क्रेडिट्स को डाउन नहीं करेंगे, वो आपके क्रेडिट्स को अप करेंगे बच्चों. ठीक है, क्योंकि एग्जामिनर आपको इवेल्युएट करता है, देखता है कि बच्चे को कितना आता है. ठीक है, तो वो वाला पॉइंट, कौन सा पॉइंट बच्चों? रिगार्डिंग द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ वॉल कॉल्ड पेरिडियम. ठीक है, which ultimately forms a sexual fruiting body called clistothecium in penicillium. उसको अगर आप साथ में लिख दो डालोगे इस डायग्राम के नीचे, ठीक है, तो वो बहुत अच्छा रहेगा. ठीक है मेरे प्यारे बच्चों. फाइनली द ascospores are liberated from clistothecium, from that nutritive fluid after complete breakdown of the wall called peridium. The ascospores germinate to produce next generation vegetative thalli. ठीक है, तो मेरे प्यारे बच्चों, तो ये था हमारे पास हमारा ग्राफिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ लाइफ साइकिल ऑफ पेनिसिलियम. अब हम नेक्स्ट करेंगे डायग्रामेटिक और पिक्टोरियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ लाइफ साइकिल ऑफ पेनिसिलियम. जो ग्राफिक रिप्रेजेंटेशन था इसमें मैंने इवेंट्स भी सारे डिटेल में आपको समझा दिया है बच्चों. ठीक है, और जो अभी वाला जो पिक्टोरियल रिप्रेजेंटेशन है इसमें मैं हल्का सा समझाऊंगा इवेंट्स. ठीक है, डिटेल में ज्यादा नहीं करूंगा बच्चों. ठीक है, तो शुरुआत हम लोग करेंगे वेजिटेटिव थैलस से. ठीक है, हाप्लॉइड वेजिटेटिव थैलस और माइसिलियम. एक तरफ हमारे पास एसेक्सुअल फेज है, एसेक्सुअल लाइफ साइकिल है, और राइट साइड में हमारे पास सेक्सुअल लाइफ साइकिल है. ठीक है, तो सबसे पहले मैं शुरुआत करूंगा एसेक्सुअल साइड से. ठीक है, any cell of the vegetative hyphae is capable to give rise to a special asexual branch called conidiophore, which can either be unbranched or branched. ठीक है बच्चों, and it produces a bottle shaped or a flask shaped structure called phyalides or sterigmata at tip, and these phyalides or sterigmata they produce conidia or conidiospore at the tip of sterigma or phyalide formed by the tubular tip of a phyalide, which is the upper part of a sterigma, because we all know that the sterigma or the phyalide it consists of a main body, lower main body, and upper smaller tubular outgrowth called tubular tip. So from this tip a large number of conidiospores are formed in a chain in a basipetal fashion, means oldest formed conidium is at tip, whereas youngest formed or the youngest conidium is present at a base. ठीक है, and conidia are formed endogenously. That means the conidia are formed within the wall of a phyalide, or precisely saying conidia are formed inside the wall of a apical tube like structure of a phyalide. ठीक है, then these are blown away by wind and on falling a suitable substratum they germinate by giving out a germ tube, and that germ tube is nothing but a tubular extension of a inner wall layer called intine. So with this asexual life cycle completes. ठीक है, these are the diagrams you have to draw my dear students. And during sexual reproduction what happens मेरे प्यारे बच्चों? We know that male gametangia are called antheridia and female gametangia are called escogonia, and there is a condition called protogyny. That means escogonia are formed prior to एंथीरिडिया। ठीक है, and ascogonium is a structure which is in the form of an elongated multinucleate structure with a curved tip. ठीक है, and male reproductive structure called ascogonium, it arises as a slender tubular outgrowth from any vegetative cell of the same thallus present near ascogonial cell or ascogonium. ठीक है, and the terminal slightly swollen portion of that tubular elongation, slender tubular elongation, differentiates in the form of antheridium. Then fertilization occurs. After fertilization, pairing of nuclei occurs. ठीक है, and then in the middle region of this multi-segmented ascogonium, some of the cells they produce lateral outgrowths called ascogenous initials, and ascogenous initials develop into ascogenous hyphae, which are short, unbranched or branched hyphae, and they will produce, the ascogenous hyphae will produce ascus eventually. In the meantime, the somatic cells twine around, interweave around this developing ascogonia. ठीक है, because there are many ascogonia arrested inside or formed inside a single fruiting body which is known as cleistothecium. We all are well aware of it. ठीक है, so I won't go into the detail. ठीक है मेरे प्यारे बच्चों, अब जो है एस्कस का डेवलपमेंट डायरेक्ट और इनडायरेक्ट दो टाइप के हैं, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द टाइप ऑफ or the position of cell or the cell, dikaryotic cell responsible for formation of ascus. It is of two types. One is direct type where the terminal cell is involved in ascus formation. Second type is indirect development or by development of crozier. ठीक है, in which the penultimate cell or the subterminal cell is involved in the formation of ascus. ठीक है बच्चों, now this ascus, the nuclei present in this young ascus undergo karyogamy. Resultant structure is a diploid nucleus. That diploid nucleus undergoes meiosis once and then mitosis once, so that we get 8 nuclei inside the sac-like structure now, which has been differentiated into an ascus. Finally, each of the nucleus take a part of cytoplasm and differentiates into an ascospore. ठीक है बच्चों, in the meantime the formation of the wall called peridium is also complete, so we get a fruiting body called cleistothecium, which consists of ascospores, the nutritive fluid, and the wall. Wall is called peridium, which is formed by interweaving of the surrounding vegetative hyphae, and the nutritive fluid is formed by degeneration of ascus wall or wall of Si and ascogenous hyphae and inner wall layers, because the peridium is a thick walled structure. ठीक है, plus ascospores are there, and because cleistothecium is a completely enclosed structure, there is no hole, no pore or no ostiole present for liberation of ascospores. So finally what happens, the wall of cleistothecium called peridium, it gelatinizes so that the ascospores are released into exterior environment, which then germinate by giving out a germ tube and produce a new vegetative thallus of a penicillium. So this was it about the life cycle of penicillium. This is the last slide which I will read. Since ascospore represents the only diploid structure in lifespan or life history of penicillium, therefore life cycle in penicillium is of a haplontic type. Thank you very much मेरे प्यारे बच्चों. Have a nice day. Stay safe.